Our first reading comes from Jeremiah 31, 27 through 34. The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of humans and the seed of animals. And just as I have watched over them to pluck up and break down and overthrow and destroy and bring evil, so I will watch over them to build and to plant, says the Lord. In those days, they shall no longer say, the parents have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. But all shall die for their own sins. The teeth of everyone who eats sour grapes shall be set on edge. The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. A covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, says the Lord. But this covenant that I make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord, I will put my law in them, and I will write on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall they teach one another, or say to one another, know the Lord. They won't have to do that, for they shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity and remember their sin no more. And from Luke 18, 1 through 8. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and to not lose heart. He said, when in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, grant me justice against my opponent. For a while he refused. But later he said to himself, though I have no fear of God, and I don't respect anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me and knocking on my door all the time, just to make her quiet, I will grant her justice, so she will not wear me out by coming continually. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day or night? Will God delay long in helping them? I tell you, God will quickly grant justice to them. Although when the Son of Man comes, will the Son of Man find faith on earth? Here in the Scriptures. And now I invite the young disciples to please come forward. I can sit on the front row here. Yeah, right there. Does this work? Test, test, test. All right, I'm going to be asking y'all some questions, and I want y'all to help tell me who is stronger. All right, if one person is lifting more weight and one person is lifting less weight, who is stronger? Who is stronger? The person who can lift more weight? Yes. And I've seen a lot of people in the gym. I got to do a visit day for people who don't work out. And there are a lot of people who lift more weight than I can, and they are stronger than I am. What about who is stronger? Someone who tries for a while and gives up, or someone who tries for a while and then decides not to give up? Who's stronger? The one that doesn't give up. Thank you, Ellen. What about who is stronger? Someone who seeks the truth or someone who seeks to look good? Okay, maybe there's something about the truth that makes them stronger. I don't know, that one was one that I wondered. Okay, what about the most powerful person in the world who relies on themselves? They might be the richest or the most powerful or the most politically powerful. I don't know, but they're the most powerful person in the world. Which is stronger, that person or one of you praying? You think that one of you praying is more powerful than the most powerful person in the world relying on themselves? Very interesting. And then, who is stronger? Someone who bullies other people or someone who makes a mistake and tells somebody that they're sorry, they admit that they made a mistake? Which of those people is stronger?
Somebody that makes that they made a mistake.
Y'all agree on that? Okay. Give me 5. Those are some powerful answers there. Do y'all agree with those answers? Yeah, pretty much. That's a good question. It's a good question. We make up our own mind and our own time. All right, well, let's say a prayer. Because I agree. I think that praying can make us really, really strong. So anytime you ever need something or you see something in the world that isn't right, take time to pray for it. You find some people that say that they're worried about something, say, may I pray with you? Would you like to pray about it? And then pray about it. And then go back to whatever you were doing. So let's pray. Holy God, let's say this after me. Holy God, thank you for letting us approach you in prayer anytime we want. Out loud or in our head. You hear us no matter what. Help us use our prayers to strengthen those in need. And to invite you in to any and every situation. Forever. Amen. Thank you so much. You have a powerful power, so go enjoy using it some this week. How's the volume on this? It seems a little quiet today. It's okay? All right. Now for the message for the older disciples. We got so much here. We have our Jeremiah reading today, which comes from a guy who was put in stocks with his head and arms sticking out for people to throw vegetables at him and make fun of him for over 24 hours. So that literally he was the laughing stock of the town and of the area. God said, look, I want you to proclaim my word. I want you to do what I tell you to do. I want you to say what I tell you to say. And that's some of what he had to go through to live into that calling. And he had to tell people that they were into idolatry, people who thought that they were the good religious people. He had to tell them that they were messing up, that they were not doing what God was saying, and that as a consequence, that people would come in and tear up their town and force them into captivity elsewhere. And so really important people with titles, well-respected religious people, gathered and told the political leaders, don't listen to Jeremiah, he's wrong. Jeremiah made a yoke one day that the Lord told him to make, and talked about the yoke that the people would have to bear as consequences for their actions. And a well-meaning prophet said, people don't want to come to church and hear that, and broke the yoke from his back. And then God and Jeremiah told that other prophet, so-called prophet, you've broken the yoke of wood and made a yoke of iron that is going to be coming up to you. And then, he was thrown in a cistern for a while so that he would starve to death. And so that the people doing it, these really upstanding, sweet, good-hearted, religious people would not be convicted against the church law of killing somebody. It's, he just accidentally happened to starve to death after we accidentally pushed him intentionally into the cistern and left him to die. And yet he was saved. Somebody went in there later and pulled him out. So he lived a rough life, giving a difficult message to a group of people who really did not want to hear that message. And what do you reckon is better? Is it better to hear a challenging message and just do our best to deal with it, or is it better to just not hear a challenging message and not be bothered or discomforted by that? What do y'all reckon? I have a few people saying, I can't hear. What's that? It's better to hear. Better to hear? Depends on better. What better means. Oh, gracious.
Yeah, it's hard to hear.
It's hard to hear. It is hard to hear. This has been a hard sermon to prepare. The part I'm going to pick up on, the Jeremiah text, is where it says, no longer shall, basically the people who committed sins, no longer shall their children inherit the responsibility and consequences of those sins. But people will be able to inherit responsibility for their own sins. And I think that's something that a lot of people here can relate to. Wouldn't it be nice if we got what we deserved for the good things we did, and got punishment for the bad things we did, and never ever got punished for the bad things that our parents did or the mistakes they made? Wouldn't that be nice? To a certain extent. Now, if I included in that, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't get benefits from our parents and grandparents' mistakes? That's a little bit harder to talk about. But that's what I'm here to talk about. We live in a society where we are told that everybody has an equal fighting chance. Our whole nation's about equality. And everybody, if they try hard enough and work hard enough, they can make something out of themselves. And they can be successful. And that's what this version of Jeremiah's prophecy, that's what some of the good news is. It doesn't matter who your parents were, doesn't matter where you came from, you can become somebody amazing. And that's an exciting thing to believe. And we can see examples of people from just about every walk of life who somehow made it to amazing prosperity and greatness in our country. So it must be true that in this country, everybody starts on an equal playing field, and if they work hard enough with enough determination, they can make from themselves and their lives just a great success. I want to tell you a little bit about how that equal playing field got thrown off base a little bit in this particular country. And I've talked about a little bit of this before, but this leads up to some of the different things we've been seeing around the courthouse and the activism on various sides. And we as a church are caught in the middle of it. We have people who would probably be protesting on this side, and people who would probably be protesting on that side, and people who would say, this is a church, we shouldn't be protesting at all, and nobody should be protesting, and people should get over this. And we have plenty of people. In fact, I think everybody in here would say, wouldn't it be great if people on both sides could just cross that street and hug each other and come to complete understanding with each other? Brothers and sisters, that's where God is going. That's where this sermon is going. That's where Jeremiah is going. But we all need to say a quick prayer. Holy God, in these 16 and a half standard Presbyterian sermon minutes that Evan has to deliver this message, we ask that you help him be very effective and efficient. In your name we pray. Let it be what you need. Amen. All right. 1640. We got 3 people who are indentured servants. That's mainly the main people brought over in the very early times of our history were indentured servants. Many of them taken from a debtor's prison in Europe to work the fields. Because guess what? It is not fun to work tobacco. It's just not fun. Nobody likes it. Nobody. We like the money that comes from it. We might like to smoke it sometimes, but working in it is not fun. So we got 3 people who try to escape and get out of this indentured servitude or slavery, but it had a time limit. If they had spent their time, 10 or 20 years working diligently, unfortunately 10 years was about the life expectancy of most people, so they'd be done with their time and then they would be dead the next day pretty much. But if they had served their time, they'd be fine. But they didn't want to serve that time. They wanted to escape early and get to enjoy life a little bit more. And so all 3 of them ran away. 2 were European, 1 was from Africa. And we have the first time in the United States of a record of, after they were caught, different punishments being given to people, not by nationality, but by race, which did not exist. Nobody talked about just complexion and treated people differently based on complexion until 1640. But somebody came up with the idea that, hey, John Punch, this black man, should be a slave for the rest of his life. And then this Irish man and this Englishman, they should maybe serve an extra 10 years or at least 2 years on their regular time, get a decent whipping and be done with it. And that was supposed to be a little sign that, hey, don't go running off with African Americans. Really don't go run off anyway. But y'all can't team up. So that's what happened in 1640. In 1676 and 77, you have, again, tons of indentured servants. We're just raiding all the European debtors' prisons, bringing everybody over here for this labor. It's much cheaper than to kidnap slaves and bring them over here. But the only problem is, if people feel like you are treating them unjustly, these lighter complexion indentured slaves, then they might rally together because they outnumber all the other people by a long shot over here in the colonies. And so they indeed felt like they were getting the wrong end of the deal, and they rebelled. And they burned Jamestown, and they had a successful rebellion. And it was whites and blacks together. Had a great time, fought for what they thought was justice. And so then they had to figure out what to do. So they kept trying to penalize people when they worked together. The idea is, why do white and black people need to be separate? And we've looked at biologically that we are all related 99.9% of our DNA. Biologically, we are not different. 2 white people have more that's different from them than a white person and a black person. So biologically, it's a lot. Well, no, they can't get together socially or politically. Well, no, that's not true. They got together just fine to run off. They got fine just together to rebel against people overstepping even their indentured servitude. So here's what was done shortly after that in 1705. The indentured servants, the white indentured servants, would get a little reward after they finished. Instead of just being called a free person, they would receive 50 acres of land. Indians didn't need it. They would get 30 shillings. They would get 10 bushels of corn, 2 nice suits, and a well-oiled musket, which would come in quite handy if any of the Native Americans came by trying to get that land back. Or if they happened to see a runaway slave, they had a musket, and they were told, everybody was told, if accidentally kill this property of somebody's because you thought that they were a threat, you will not be convicted in court. So, if you're going to have to err on the side of going ahead and shooting. You know, it is a law. It is a agricultural loss, but that's okay. We don't want a lot of escaped slaves. So you can see how this was put in place to divide people so that they would never be on the same side, so that they would literally be armed against one another, and how we're making this game very unequal. In fact, I'll just fast forward to the GI Bill in World War II. We have 15 or 16 million people fighting for the United States once we finally entered World War II. And out of those 16 million were 2.5 million African Americans. So then we created this amazing thing called the GI Bill that helps give people who served in education and helps give them a down payment of $2,000 to $4,000 so that they can make that down payment on their house. And mortgages were completely redone so that instead of less than half of the population being able to do it and pay it off immediately, all of a sudden you've got 30 years to pay it off at a very, very good rate. And so African Americans, by and large, were not given these mortgages. And if they were given this eligibility for a mortgage to buy a house in a segregated state, where guess what? You can't live here. It's segregated. We're not letting those people live here. And so then, even on the few times that a family manages to get in, then all the white people move out. And what happens when we have invested property? I just bought a house. I'm happy as a lark because all my money is going to just continue to grow in equity, and eventually I'll be able to sell it for at least as much as I paid, hopefully more. And I can borrow against that money if I need to. I mean, housing is a huge leg up in investment. And the game Monopoly knows that. And so people have done an exercise talking about a fair playing field, where if you have a group in college, they would get this out, and they would have the African Americans who start playing this game. They did an experiment where they played for 3 hours, and the African American students got to pick which token they wanted to be. My favorite was always the horse, personal horse. And they would play for 2 hours. White people would sit on the side and wait. Next time you're in line, think about that. How fun it would be to watch other people play a game for 2 hours, especially if we weren't allowed to play something on our phone. So then, after 2 hours, anybody here played Monopoly? All right. How does the board look like after 2 hours? All the property's taken up. Somebody's bought even the most hated property. Somebody said, "Well, I'll make a little bit of money off of it." And when you land on Pennsylvania Avenue, is the rent $28 after 2 hours? No, people have wheeled and dealed until you have at least 2 houses. It's $450. That's a third of the price you start with in this. Or, God forbid, there's a hotel on it. That's $1,400. That means that those starting the game who happen to land on Pennsylvania Avenue start out with $1,500. They have $100 left. And then they'll get the pass go and get another $2. They'll have $300 to their name, no property. Everybody else has property, and it has houses and hotels all over it. In fact, studies show that as this experiment has been done again and again, that people actually started the game at the starting of hour number 3, after 2 hours had elapsed, starting into that third hour, they actually want to go to jail. They do. And anybody who's played Monopoly and sees that Christmas-colored board knows what I'm talking about. You'd much rather wait out jail than land on the boardwalk or even Baltic Avenue with $500 worth of hotels. So we weren't set up to have an equal chance. And unfortunately, if we look at housing today, prison, law enforcement, schools, healthcare, employment, there are disparities based on outcomes, based on race, that are hard to explain, except for what we've been talking about so far. So we do not live in a society right now where everybody has this amazingly equal shot. And I don't have time to go into that as much as I wish I had time for. But I want to tell you about something. There is some good news here. With the Saturday protest, I heard someone from CORE, that's Chatham Organizing for Racial Equity, and some program that this church supports and houses some of the meetings in this church. A person from there said, I wish I could go across the street to some people waving the Confederate flags and just hear their side. Just hear where they're coming from. And I had somebody stop in my pastor's office from this congregation and say verbatim the exact same thing. Instead of making assumptions about what people are really believing or meaning with various things, I wish I could just have a conversation and just hear where people are coming from with this, and what's in their heart, and what they mean by it, and what they don't mean by it, and just to hear them tell me, and just to be able to listen and hear them. Well, there's a powerful book that I just read called Anxious to Talk About It by Carolyn Helzel, and she's a professor at Austin Theological Seminary, Presbyterian Seminary. And it's basically a book for white Christians about talking about racism. In fact, she's doing a webinar this Tuesday at, I believe, 2 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock. And I'm happy to pay for it if anybody wants to tune into it. And if you're not there for it live, you still get access to hear the whole thing later. But the book is amazing in itself. But what she says at the end of the book is that there's actually a theological framework that we can approach the talks about racism. And that framework is gratitude. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think, let me go preach about racism today, or let me go have a talk with someone about racism, I wasn't too grateful about that opportunity. I was, as she says in the book, anxious. I was anxious. I wasn't saying, thank you, dear Lord. I was hoping this Sunday would come around, and I was hoping I would have exactly this much time to prepare for it, and exactly these circumstances in which to prepare for it. I wasn't saying that. But she says, no, actually, bear with me. Gratitude is an amazing framework. And here's where she's coming from. She's coming from those glimpses of God that people in CORE and people in this congregation shared about desiring to have the gift of listening to somebody else's point of view. It's a real gift. Those of us who were able to go on a little hayride at Lindale Farms trip yesterday got to hear an amazing perspective from a North Carolina farmer that touched on healthcare and touched on environmentalism and touched on economy and all sorts of stuff. And it was a gift. It was a gift to hear that perspective. And I'd certainly never heard elements of that. If we approach racism and the differences of opinion and feeling we have in this room, the differences in opinion that are out there in various protests, which I'm sure we haven't run out of protests yet. I'm sure God will bless us with some more protests. There are some rich conversations that could be had. Now, I'm not saying go over there and walk up to somebody and say, have a seat, let's talk. That might work. I'd recommend praying first. But But that is a direction that this church could go. Not just having our various opinions on where we were or are going to end up, but just listening to where somebody else is coming from. And knowing that in listening, there's a real opportunity. The author of this book, Carolyn Helsel, said that she was invited to be a part of a thing in the Presbyterian Church USA, and it was a listening session. And she had so much experience, had written all these dissertations, and was a pro at all this. And she was not given a chance to speak at that. And she says inside that hurt, because she's like, I've done a lot of research on this, and this is the topic of this, and I would really like to speak. And so instead, she was just kind of hurt and just kind of, feeling kind of like that Monopoly game where she was having to sit inside. But then she looked at that experience later and she said, what was I thinking? Despite whatever research and knowledge I had, I could have learned more about where these people are specifically coming from. I could have heard things that I did not know. And her book is about all these things that were, how every single story she's ever heard has touched and colored her understanding of racism and really helped flesh it out and helped her understand where to go from here. So we have this chance to be Christians that don't just ignore racism, that don't just step back from the discomfort that I think everybody feels in talking about it or acknowledging it. We have a chance to actually slowly wade in to these conversations amongst ourselves, maybe in organized ways, I don't know. If you are interested in dabbing your foot in, let me know. There's some resources, and we can talk about, we can pray about, maybe just to start with praying of, Lord, guide this process in a way that you think is fit. We don't have a hope. We're not all trying to end up progressive Democrats at the end of this, or Republicans, at the end of this. That's not the goal. The goal is to just talk about it and figure out what God is trying to do with this. Because we've been divided against our will by a power, a mysterious power. And we don't have to let that be the reality we stay in for the rest of this church's future, or the rest of this community's future, or the rest of this nation's future. To God be the glory. Amen.